They say the city sank, but maybe it just wanted to rest. There is a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the quiet surrender of everything that once was noise. Some would call it an end, but the sea, that old guardian of all things tired, knows how to recognize when something just needs to lie down. Lucca had read about that city for the first time in an old book with yellowed pages that smelled of the sea. It said the city lay beyond the waves, where sunlight bent into blue and mystery. No one knew for sure if it had been swallowed by a storm or by a wish. The rare wish to stop. That night, sitting by the window, Lucca watched the reflection of lights dancing on the surface of the water. The sound of the tides made him think that the ocean breathed for all of us. And what if what the book said was true? What if that city had not been destroyed, but had simply chosen to hide from the noise of the world? He imagined the houses covered in algae that shone like stars, the silent squares where fish now danced, and the empty streets that seemed to wait for the return of a slower time. There was peace in that image, a peace the world above had long forgotten. Blue, lying at his feet, lifted his nose for a moment, as if he too could feel the call from the bottom of the sea. Lucca smiled and ran his hand over his soft head, hearing the wind mix with the distant sound of the waves. It was as if the ocean whispered something ancient. Not everything that disappears is lost. Sometimes one must step away to keep on existing. And there, between the sound of the wind and Blue's breathing, Lucca understood that silence also speaks, but only for those who still allow themselves to listen. They say that even after centuries, the city still shines beneath the waters, not with the light of fire or sun, but with the calm glow of memories. The ancients called it the sleep of lights, a mysterious phenomenon in which the buildings, even empty, kept glowing softly, as if remembering those who once lived there. Lucca imagined this scene as if he could see it before his eyes. The streets covered in golden corals, the windows lit from within, and the reflection of the algae moving like tiny breaths. Each shimmer looked like an old thought, a whisper that time refused to erase. There was something deeply human in that silent spectacle, maybe because, deep down, every living being wants to leave a small light on when they depart, a sign that their presence remains, even after the body rests. While writing in his journal, Lucca noticed the faint glow of the lamp over the pages, and wondered if the light of that city would be like this one. Not bright, but enough to warm the darkness. Blue, still asleep, moved his paws lightly, as if dreaming of running through some underwater street, and Lucca smiled, feeling that the silence between them was the same that existed between the sea and the sky, a space full of invisible meaning. He then wrote a short line in his journal. Maybe the lights of that city are not trapped at the bottom of the ocean, but shining inside us. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the sound of imaginary tides surround him. It was as if the waves themselves were breathing with him in a slow, steady rhythm where there was no more hurry, no more urgency, only the natural pace of life falling back into balance. That night, the sound of the wind changed. It was slower, denser, as if carrying words that didn't need to be spoken. Lucca looked out the window, and for a moment, he thought he saw the reflection of a city under the moonlight, not made of stone, but of liquid memories. The lights seemed to call him, not with urgency, but with the tenderness of someone inviting you back home. He closed his eyes and, in silence, let his body follow the rhythm of the tides. Everything around became lighter, as if the air itself had been washed from the inside. And then he realized the city that slept beneath the sea was not a myth. It was a metaphor. It was the name the ocean gave to the parts of us that stop fighting against time and choose simply to exist. He remembered the busy streets, the hurried voices, the days when it felt like the whole world was running without knowing why. Maybe, he thought, each of us carries a small submerged city inside, a place of calm we forget to visit. And when the weariness comes, the soul tries to return there, like someone seeking shelter in an old home. Blue lifted his head and looked at Lucca with those peaceful eyes that seemed to understand more than any word could. The dog came closer, touched his nose to Lucca's hand, and in that silent touch, there was something sacred. It was as if he said, "You don't have to understand the sea. Just breathe with it." Lucca smiled, and the smile was half human, half sea. The journal lay open on his lap, and a soft breeze turned the pages on its own, as if the wind wanted to read what he had not yet written. Then he wrote just one last line. The city doesn't sleep. It just learned to live by the rhythm of the heart. And in that moment, the room, the sound of the wind, and the murmur of the sea seemed to blend into a single sigh. Everything was in its place. The silence had finally come home. Lucca thought about the people who once lived in that sunken city. What would their voices have sounded like? The laughter, the songs, the murmur of conversations by the sea? As centuries passed, silence took the place of all that. But instead of emptiness, it became presence. It was as if every word once spoken there had turned into a particle of light, floating forever between the waters. Lucca imagined faces smiling without haste, eyes meeting in peace, hands building not to last, but to belong. Those people may not have vanished. They only dissolved in time, like memories that prefer rest over remembrance. Blue, sleeping deeply, twitched his ears and made a soft sound, as if dreaming of those same silent figures. Lucca smiled. He realized that silence is not the absence of life. It is the space where life rests. The wind slowed down, and the sound of the sea became clearer. The waves hit with an almost human cadence, like an ancient heart, slow and steady. Lucca began to notice notes in the noise of the water, as if there were a melody hidden deep in the ocean. He closed his eyes and let his imagination guide him. Suddenly, the city seemed to gain a voice. The columns vibrated like instruments. The corals chimed like distant bells. And the sea itself breathed in rhythms of eternity. It was a song no one else could hear, because it could only be heard by those willing to be silent inside. Lucca understood that maybe the secret of calm was exactly that, not finding new answers, but learning to listen to what the world already says in silence. He wrote in his journal, "The sea doesn't sing to be heard. It sings so the heart remembers the rhythm of the beginning." The night grew deeper. The moonlight touched the glass of the window, and Lucca's reflection blended with the dark blue of the sea. For a moment he could no longer tell what was him and what was the ocean. He felt himself divided, part boy, part thought, part silence, part sea. Then he understood that Sunken City was not just a distant myth. It represented everything that exists within us, but that we rarely visit. It was the symbolic name of the emotions we let sink, so we can keep breathing on the surface. Blue opened his eyes slowly, as if he too had realized the same thing. His eyes reflected the same glow of the moonlight. Lucca looked at him and felt a peace that didn't come from understanding, but from presence. Maybe, he thought, calm is this, to recognize yourself whole, even when part of you is underwater. The clock marked an hour that no longer mattered. Time, inside that room, seemed to have forgotten to move. Lucca imagined the corals growing slowly over the ruins, soft, patient, unafraid to wait. They covered everything that once was haste. The stones now shone with colors the sun would never see. And yet there was beauty in that, a beauty that is born only when there are no witnesses. He realized that the modern world forgot the value of the invisible. We want applause even for what is silent, but the truest things prefer anonymity. Like the corals, they grow in silence, in the dark, fed only by the steady flow of time. Blue turned on his side and took a deep breath, and the sound made him smile. Everything there seemed alive. The dog, the wind, the sea, and even the memories of those who no longer existed. Lucca looked up and noticed something curious. The clock on the table had stopped. The hands were still, frozen at the same minute for a long time. And for some reason that felt right. It was as if time had decided to rest with him. He thought about the tides. They come and go, never complaining. They are never in a hurry, never late. The sea is not afraid to begin again, and maybe that was what the sunken city was trying to teach the world above. That time doesn't have to be an enemy, that there is wisdom in repeating the same movement until you find peace. Lucca smiled and wrote another line in his journal. Haste is fear disguised as will. While he thought about that, the wind blew through the window and made the lamp sway gently. The light flickered, casting golden reflections on the walls. For a moment, it seemed the whole room was breathing, and he understood. Time, when respected, becomes music, and every heartbeat is just another wave coming and going. No beginning, no end, only rhythm. The pen glided lightly across the pages. Lucca wrote without thinking, as if the sea, not he, guided the words. The thoughts came in slow waves, each sentence born from silence and returning to it. What the world calls an end, he wrote, the sea calls a pause. He looked at Blue, who slept deeply, and realized that even sleep has a way of teaching about trust. To sleep is to surrender to the invisible, to let the body disappear for a few hours, believing that morning will always come. Lucca sighed. He had spent so much time trying to understand the world, when maybe it was enough just to feel it. With his fingertips, he touched the journal as one touches an altar. The pages felt warm, as if they held within them the heat of the sea itself. The sound of the waves outside became softer, more spaced out, and in his heart something quieted down. That sunken city, he thought, might never have truly existed. But every time someone chooses silence over haste, it rises a little closer to the surface. Sleep was already wrapping around him. His eyes grew heavy, but his mind seemed awake somewhere else, as if walking through streets of light and water. Lucca saw houses made of coral, arches covered in golden algae, and people made of mist smiling at him. No word was spoken. Nothing needed to be explained. There was only calm. He walked through a great underwater square, where the ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet, as if the ocean itself had a heart. And suddenly, he understood what he had been searching for all along. The city that slept under the sea was the reflection of the human soul when it finally finds peace. The city doesn't sleep, he thought. It just learned to live by the rhythm of the heart. In that instant, everything seemed to dissolve. The sound of the waves, the wind, Blue's breathing. Only a deep silence remained, the same that exists before the first dream. Lucca closed the journal, turned off the light, and whispered to his sleeping friend, Blue is already asleep. You can rest too. And the sea outside answered with one last calm breath, as if agreeing in secret. The whole room seemed to smile, and the night at last was completely at peace.